is brought to you by Skillshare. I'm sure that all of you remember this dress. The Lyrica Matoshi strawberry dress that swept the internet and cottagecore and fan art for a solid couple of years. And now I'm bringing it up again, 5 years later. Is this dress even a tiny bit still relevant? Probably not. I'm bringing this up because back when this dress was still relevant, a bunch of people in the costuming and sewing community were talking about ways to make this dress design a little bit more them.
I'm not trying to imply here this isn't a great dress. I love this dress design, in case that isn't already clear.
Some people on Twitter were discussing how to gothify the strawberry dress. Rachel Maxey made a Halloween-themed version that I absolutely adore. And this got me pondering what I could do to make this dress just a little bit more me. After perusing all my options, I finally decided what is more me than a strawberry dress-themed set of Rococo-style fantasy armor, complete with a giant sword. Eventually. I'm not making that in this video.
That's right, for this dress, I'm keeping the concept and color palette and switching the medium entirely, because the only thing better than a girly pop dress is girly pop armor. For the design here, I'm really trying to preserve the silhouette and what makes the look and feel of the original dress so iconic, so I'm giving the armor look super big, exaggerated pauldrons. I'm giving the breastplate a snatched waist with trim and filigree molding around the bust and a similar cut to the ties on the original dress. I'm going for a really exaggerated hip flare with some hip plates under that for even more volume, and finishing off the general silhouette with an actual voluminous fabric skirt underneath made out of the strawberry dress inspired material. To go alongside all of this, I also fully leaned into the armor concept by adding elbow armor, bracers, a gorget, and shin guards that you can't see because I didn't feel like drawing legs. Textures and finishes are also really important to this project and design. The period of history I'm inspired by is super lavish and ornate, so for the strawberry pattern on the armor, I'm going for a more detailed ceramic inspired paint job with more of a porcelain finish. I'm going for a super bright metallic gold for all of the filigree trim, something that looks polished and brand new, and I'm going for realistic sculpts on all of the strawberry embellishments. I'm hoping that all of this comes together in such a way that people look at it and get instantly hungry and crave a strawberry pastry.
So with that general design in mind, let's get patterning.
So I was able to rely on a couple of pre-made patterns for this, but since the pattern for this whole costume is so specific, I had to make some myself and also had to do a little bit of Frankensteining to make these work.
I'm gonna try to work on the corset breastplate area first because that's kind of the area of the design that is subject to a little bit of change. Not sure if I like exactly what's going on here.
The main part I wasn't sure about was the neckline, because the plunging neckline is a pretty big aspect of the original dress design, but when designing my armor, I didn't exactly want to add a stab me here window to everything, but
part of me just wants to put a boob window in there and say screw it.
My devotion to the vibes of the original design were just too strong, so I did effectively end up putting a bit of a boob window in there. Also, thanks a lot to the CosTube Discord for giving me some feedback and ideas on how to make this design better. I also took this as an opportunity to revise the design overall and get a little bit more specific with the placement of the trim and embellishments. So with a little bit more of a specific direction, it was time to pattern some booby cups, which I did by covering a well-fitting bra in a layer of masking tape. That way I could take the masking tape off and transfer the pattern onto some poster board, resulting in a pretty decently fitting cup pattern. From there, I altered an existing bodice pattern that I had lying around that I knew fit me pretty well. The original pattern this was based on is a slightly altered version of the Rose Cafe bodice. It is such a well-made pattern, I've used it a bajillion times at this point. After adding a sharper point to the bottom, this is what it was looking like so far. I then moved on to patterning the hip plate, which I did in a very chaotic freeform way. I just roughly traced out a shape that I generally thought would work. This is my typical approach to patterning bigger pieces like this. Just wing it and you'll get closer the more you revise it a little bit. I had the exact same approach to the hip plate. I just cut out an oval-ish shape and then cut a notch in the bottom, altering the pattern so that it would curve a little bit, generally where I needed it to.
I think the corset itself is pretty good, but I still have a couple of kinks to work out. Also, for the kind of skirt area, I'm really not sold on the shape yet. I think I want it maybe a little less dramatic, but also, I don't know. And then this hip plate is just currently sort of here.
To solve my hip plate issue, I eventually decided to add a little flare on the bottom that would cover the gap between the corset itself and the bigger hip plate skirt area. I also liked that it deepened the V at the bottom of the corset and made everything a little bit more dramatic. Next, I needed patterns for all the other armor. I already had an old bracer pattern lying around, so that was all covered. For the shin pieces, I'm using Kamui Cosplay's Crusader leg armor pattern that I had purchased in the past, and I'm also going to be partially using Kamui Cosplay's soldier pauldron pattern, but I'm going to pattern the main part of the pauldron myself. For this, I grabbed some aluminum foil, shaped it into a very rough dome, and then stuck that on top of a snow globe that I had lying around in order to begin shaping the rest of the form. I was basically just sculpting with aluminum foil here, trying to finagle it into the closest shape I could get to my design as possible, which didn't work too bad, honestly. I then covered it in masking tape and drew some seam lines and registration marks on, and I then cut it and transferred the pattern to poster board off screen so that it would lay flat. I patterned the elbow piece using similar shenanigans. I had this little jack-o'-lantern candle holder lying around, so I just covered that in masking tape, drew on a pattern and some registration marks, and transferred that onto some poster board, and that, along with some fake mechanical pieces, did the trick. Finally, the mantle pattern was adapted out of the one that I made for my porcelain paladin costume. I mainly just made the color higher and switched the opening to close in the back instead of the front. Alright, I've been doing more patterning, and this is where we are so far, and I think I'm finally at the point where I'm generally happy with everything that's going on here. Main thing that I have changed since you saw this, I altered an old gorget pattern that I had lying around, make it more pointy both in the front and the back. I have altered this hip piece so that it has a little bit more form, lays the way I want it to, and I've also made it just a little bit fancy in a couple of places. I think the main game changer was adding a piece to the bottom of the corset to just make it plunge a little bit deeper, give it more of that like V shape, and also hide the gap between this and this hip piece. And then with the hip plate, I added another layer on top of the first one just to make it like a little bit more dimensional and fancy. And then they edge under this hip piece just like so. So with all that patterning out of the way, I now have so much Worbla and craft foam to cut, so let's get on that. Ran out of thermoplastic. The UPS truck literally drove up now to deliver my extra sheet of Worbla, so that's very good. And the new Worbla has been acquired. I hadn't cut out my bigger pieces yet, so I did that now. Now I need to assemble all of this. Very fun. Before we keep going, if you want to get into sewing or costuming but you have absolutely no idea where to start, look no further than this video sponsor, Skillshare. For me, the most intimidating thing about learning a new skill is the getting started part and being worried about not having the tools or information that I need to take that first step. For example, I've been wanting to learn how to crochet for several years now. I've talked about it on the channel and I haven't started because I'm just intimidated. I'm worried that I'm gonna just get lost. But next month I want to start my very first crochet project, and Tony Lipsey's class, Modern Crochet Essential Skills for Getting Started, is helping me mentally prepare for that undertaking and also physically prepare. Gotta get my yarn and like the hook things. I've checked out this class before, but it's been a while at this point, so it's been the perfect way to get reacquainted with the tools and techniques that I'll need, and hopefully I can finally dive into crochet as another hobby on my skill tree. And similarly, if you're completely new to a skill like sewing, Skillshare has Sewing Basics Make Your Own Clothing with Denise Bayron, which is a perfect introduction to all the tools and techniques you'd need to get started on your first garment. And if you don't have a sewing machine, you don't even really need one. You can learn valuable hand sewing techniques with Bernadette Banner's Hand Sewing Basics Work Wonders with Fabric, Needle, and Thread. But if you're interested in learning a skill that I didn't mention here, Skillshare's catalog spans countless topics like art and illustration, design, photography, video editing, and many more. And their classes are taught by world-class creative professionals and successful entrepreneurs, so you're always getting expert information. So if you want to check out any of the classes that I mentioned here, or even my class, Sketchbook Regularly, Create Character-Driven, Colorful
colorful spreads.
The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so get started today.
Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the project.
Whenever it came time to assemble the armor, I had some challenges emerge. Normally, whenever I make armor like this, I sandwich my warblet around pieces of poster board. I do this for two reasons. First, since warblet is a thermoplastic, you typically need something more structural and solid to shape it around so that it doesn't melt as you're trying to actually assemble a piece. And second, I usually mock up my armor in poster board so I can just take my mock-up pieces and use them for the final build. Here, I decided against using poster board so that the pieces have more structure in the long run.
The main reason I did things this way is whenever I've used poster board in the past on like corset pieces or anything that is going to be more in contact with my skin, if I wear it outside somewhere and I begin sweating, paper and moisture don't like to act nicely together, and that has created some problems in some of those pieces. So I sort of had a time putting all of this together, and I mainly attribute that to using foam as the base.
Unfortunately, using such thin foam for the base meant that these were a nightmare to heat up and assemble. I used 3mm EVA foam for the foam pieces underneath, and I had to be so careful with how I was heating up and assembling all of these pieces. The foam underneath needed to get hot enough for me to actually shape the piece and give it curvature where it needed it, but if it got too hot, it would get super floppy and lose any structure it had. The foam was also really bad at getting air bubbles underneath it. That is something that I usually don't struggle with whenever I use poster board. It just usually provides a way better barrier to the air coming through the heat gun. Because of all these new challenges, it maybe took me twice as long to assemble all of these pieces as it normally would if I was using poster board, which is something that I was really not happy about because number one, annoying, and number two, it really threw a wrench in my schedule for this project. But I eventually powered through and got everything assembled without too much on-camera complaining. Whenever everything was fully assembled and shaped properly, I had some mess to cover up, so I whipped out the quick seal and just started glooping layers of that over all of my seams and any unsightly areas that I wanted to cover up, and then I could just take some water on my fingers and smooth it out to a buttery consistency. That then just had to cure in the basement overnight while being guarded by my clone.
I had some casualties along the way. These hip plates just ended up being, the consistency is that of marshmallow fluff. I should have used 5mm EVA foam as the base for these. I realized the error of my ways now. I did use 5mm EVA foam on the solid pieces that are just going to be foam, which then led me to the thought, why not just make these also foam? Which is probably what I should have done in the first place. Comment below any ideas of what to do with these. They're not getting thrown out. I gotta figure something out. I don't know if anyone cares, but I think next time what I'm going to do instead of what I just did, use a combination of poster board and EVA foam at least on the corset part and anywhere else that is going to come in contact with my skin or just closer to my body. In the future, I think I will just keep using poster board anywhere that's not going to absorb a lot of sweat or moisture, and then use foam on pieces like corsets, mantles, stuff like that that are going to be closer to my body so that that sort of thing doesn't happen because it's really gross. It can be so frustrating sometimes to figure out like what is going to work well structurally and both practically whenever you're wearing it, especially in like the swampy soup is air state that I live in. You guys want to see something? Let's see, for the weather today, there was a heat advisory. The high was 95 degrees and it felt like 105. What's the humidity? Humidity, 84%. This is why I have to safeguard costumes against turning into human goo. Disgusting, but something that I have to think about. So since I am going for a Rococo kind of aesthetic for these, the next step as usual is to use my little silicone molds and some hot glue to make a bunch of these embellishments and filigree pieces to go on the sides and trim it out and everything. This time I decided, hey, you know, I use these so much, why not invest in a couple of new pieces to expand my collection? So I also have these to work with on this project just to make it look a little bit more unique from some of the pieces that I've done in the past. And I also tried to choose some that had a lot more scroll work going on because I do want to kind of give this more of a strawberry vine theme to it with all of the embellishments. So I think that these are going to work super, super well for that. So as usual, I also started early with making all of those because it takes a while to actually get all of the molds dry and produce enough to trim the entire suit of armor. In the spirit of other things that I purchased for this video, since there is sort of like a strawberry dress-esque skirt happening at the bottom of my design, I did purchase some strawberry fabric. more to do that with.
But we're gonna worry about the whole skirt situation later.
Now, I have to decorate all of this, and thankfully, like I said, I've been working ahead with these pieces. I've been trying to make as many as I possibly can so that I don't have to sit here and literally wait for glue to dry. So I'm gonna start working these into a design that fits what I have here. Try to get as close to this as possible, but also I'm gonna like just go with what looks good. I don't like being locked into a plan. The other thing that I need to do here is also sculpt some little strawberries to go as centerpieces in the middle of some of the armor. I think I'm gonna do that with foam clay, but I have not decided yet entirely. I might break out like the polymer clay if I really want to, if I decide that I want something that holds a little bit more detail. Polymer clay can be a little bit fragile sometimes, so I don't know if I want to go that route. It's also heavy, as I am reminded of time and time again with every single project that I use it for. When am I gonna learn? Anyways, let's get fancy.
It was time to sculpt all of my little strawberry embellishments. At first I started doing this with foam clay and these were looking decently cute, but I quickly realized that they were not going to hold nearly as much detail as I wanted them to. Foam clay is really handy in a lot of ways, but it does just have a tendency to melt into glue as it dries. Even though I eventually abandoned this idea, I did make quite a few of these to use in various places just as kind of a backup because I knew I didn't have that much polymer clay on hand. So I switched to polymer clay only for the most important central strawberries. I also made sure to bulk out each of my polymer clay strawberries by using foil in the center, and unsurprisingly, polymer clay held detail so much better than the foam clay did. I was able to carve in all of the little strawberry seeds and have them be very visible. I made little leaves to frame and accent all of my strawberries. I made little strawberry tops that framed around them so nicely, and I made a pretty big variety of strawberries, some bigger and some smaller. So after a quick bake to cure the clay, which is also a huge benefit of using polymer clay for this, I was able to glue all of those into place on my armor. But my armor was still looking a little bit bare. I wanted to add a couple of foam leaves to some of the strawberry vines that I made just to fill them out a little bit more, and also to give my armor a little bit of three-dimensional detail. So I cut some little leaf shapes out of some 3mm EVA foam and carved a bunch of details and leaf veins in them with my wood burning tool. And 3mm EVA foam works especially well for this because it doesn't hold up well to heat at all. So that causes the foam to shrink and warp in really organic ways, and it really ends up looking like little leaves.
Alright, that once again took absolutely forever, but I'm finally done decorating all of my armor and I'm really, really happy with how it's looking so far. I'm so close to the painting process. I can almost smell it. I am so excited for that. Anyways, before I can paint this pink, which I'm very, very excited for, are you ever just a girl? Well, I was able to kind of, go over some of the seams with quick seal and do my best to make this as smooth as possible whenever I was actually assembling it. It's still a little bumpy, a little bit crusty, and I'm here to try to do something about it. So before I actually put the pink paint on, I'm going to attempt to kind of prime this in a way with my usual triple clear thick enamel glaze. Usually I use it to seal projects and get that kind of like UV resin aesthetic because for some reason I'm really bad at applying UV resin without making it all bumpy and gross. But here I'm going to try to use it to smooth out a couple of places that just don't quite look right. And hopefully that'll get me a slightly better finish on a couple of these pieces.
Yeah, this humidity is so infuriating. What am I supposed to do with this?
right, moment of truth. Let's see how this all reacts to the other paint. While that paint is drying, I need to do something about the skirt and the headpiece. So for the skirt, I am going to try to keep things as simple as possible. And I'm also just trying to reduce fabric waste here because I have this cut of fabric that I got, of course, and I can't really see myself using scraps of this for any other project, especially such small scraps that I would get by cutting this or trying to make like any particular style of skirt. So this is a rectangular piece of fabric. I am just going to use basically a rectangular skirt situation sewn on to some ribbon. It's gonna be sewn onto some ribbon. I thought that I had more of this. Basically, like I've done a bunch in the past, just sew it onto the waistband and then have it tie around my waist and have it open front like I have in my design. And I was thinking about gathering this, but I kind of like the drape of it if I basically just like gather the back a little bit and just basically do this. You can't see. So I'm thinking basically do this so that the front sides of the rectangle actually touch the floor and there's like a little bit more poof, like at the bottom of the skirt. I think if I gathered it, I would lose a little bit of that, and I really am going for, you know, drama here. In addition to that, I also have this piece, which is a valance that I thrifted forever ago for a different project that I never did, but it already has some beautiful pleated ruffles on the outside of it. And what I could do is cut this off, sew it to the bottom of this, have it look actually more like the strawberry dress. But I think if I do that, it's just going to be too heavy because this fabric is a good bit more dense than that fabric. And I think it would also just be a missed opportunity for more of a petticoat situation. So I've been trying to devise ways to get this ruffliness on the bottom without really having to cut this piece of fabric. So I'm thinking maybe we almost do something like this. I'm thinking I then throw this in the back to get that extra poof. That was a lot of me just thinking out loud. Why don't I pin this together and show you what I'm talking about? I think that might be more of a visual aid. Just kidding, I went ahead and already sewed it together. This is my idea. All right, so honestly what's going on here is pretty chaotic and not the best. It's just one of those sewing situations where don't look too close at it. Avert your gaze and don't worry about it. Basically, this will work for what I want to do. It doesn't have to be too crazy. I think in the future, I am going to kind of redo this and make it better and actually like add some tulle ruffle onto the bottom of this skirt or maybe another petticoat or something. But I have very lightly just tacked this on to this little piece of lace so that I can tie it onto myself. So it's easy enough to like redo this in the future. And right now I'm just gonna say good enough. I'm also going to try and keep the headpiece as simple as possible. So I have leftover little filigree pieces that I haven't used that I'm going to use on the headpiece. And I'm going to start with just a wire wrapped base. That way I have something sturdy to put all of that on top of. I also have designated little strawberry guys, which seeing this one, I'm a little concerned that I made it too big, but we're gonna figure that out. Let's wrap some wire.
The wire wrap, I used a layout that I made for a previous project because you're really not going to see it in the end product anyways. I just needed something that was going to be stable and fit the general shape.
Okay, I have wire wrapped my base, so let me just kind of bend this around my head. It's like not too perfect because this is gonna get covered up anyway, so I figured it doesn't have to be amazing, just has to like be functional. I feel like that's pretty good. So large. I don't know about this one. I got some little guys here. I think that's maybe a little bit more delicate, tasteful. I think I'm gonna go with this one.
Gluing these on was so brainless and cozy. I was really just trying to find pieces that would match the general shape, and then I combined a couple of pieces together. I, of course, glued some leaves that I made earlier in my little strawberry in the middle there. And from there, it was really just a matter of making sure the two pieces that frame my face are going to stay in place whenever I'm wearing it. So I did end up gluing some extra wire onto those once assembly was done. And when the piece was finished, it looked like this. I was really happy with how it was shaping up. I gave it a metallic gold paint job off screen, and even though this only took about an hour, I really loved it. With my pink base coat dry, I wanted to go in with my airbrush before detail painting and give all of my panels a gradient and also darken all of the filigree pieces. I usually do my metallics by dry brushing the filigree with some Prep and Buff, so I really just need a darker base coat to provide some contrast. I really love the deep red berry color that I was able to mix here, although halfway through the process, I began to question if this was really vibing with the pastel aesthetic that I'm trying to go for with this project. I think this would look fabulous with a different kind of aesthetic in mind, but I do think it is overpowering the light pink a lot. This was probably not the best color selection for this project, but I mostly blamed that on my delirious 3 a.m. brain.
It is now time to paint little tiny strawberries onto all of this. So for my strawberries, I have saved a couple of reference photos on Pinterest of the general aesthetic that I want to go for, because I don't want to do like an exact one-to-one copy of the print on the strawberry dress. I kind of want to make it more my own and fit the genre and the aesthetic of this costume, so you probably can't see that. I'll just put it up on screen. I'm really going for something a little bit more historical, a little bit more in that like Rococo vein, because I feel like that's sort of an escalation of the aesthetic of the strawberry dress, like that, but just like edge it more into maximalist, if that's even possible. I don't want to veer too far away from the original design, but I do quite like things sort of like this image where you have more of the vines and the leaves in there. I really am trying to make this design and concept my own and not do just like straight up plagiarism, but make it armor. I'm gonna experiment on some pieces that are not as focal in the design to kind of figure out what aesthetic I want to do, and then I will go from there.
I did as much of the detail painting as I could muster that night, which meant the top 2 hip plates and most of the corset.
Okay, here is my initial test, and I'm a big fan. I think this is great. It's like right in the sweet spot of what I need, so I'm gonna keep going with this style. Hopefully it will continue to look good.
But I'm actually glad that I was not able to get to as much of this as I wanted to, because whenever I woke up the next morning, I had a bit of an idea, and I decided to call a little bit of an audible with my plans for the gold pieces.
A little painting update, because it's the next day and I now have much fresher eyes, but I've decided to kind of pivot the direction that I want to go in for the gold. Unfortunately, in the light of day, I feel like I went a little bit too ham on all of the like burgundy red color. I feel like it's taking away from the pastel aesthetic a little bit. Some of y'all probably could have told me that's what was gonna happen when I did all this, but that was also like 3 a.m. brain last night. And since it's kind of dark and overwhelming, I did a little test with the rub and buff to see if that would even like provide enough contrast, if that would like lighten up the design any, and I just honestly don't love how the rub and buff looks. I think the antique aesthetic works for some of the costumes that I've made, but I don't think it's quite the direction for this. I have also done a test with just some gold spray paint, and honestly, just a side-by-side, I like the spray paint so much more. Again, I think that this gold border looks much better. Also, hell scenario, this foam really did not play well with the paint whenever I was taking the masking tape off. I hate it here. I'm gonna have to repaint some of this. Thankfully, the Warbler holds up to taking off masking tape a lot better. Hopefully, I won't have this happen again. Okay, after a little Googling, I figured out a better masking solution, minimizing like the use of masking tape and just mostly using foil, which shouldn't disrupt the paint job, hopefully.
So I masked everything off with a mixture of aluminum foil and masking tape in an effort to protect the paint job as much as possible, and then gave all of the filigree pieces a healthy coat of a gold metallic spray paint. In case you're worried about waste here, because I certainly was, this is so much aluminum foil and masking tape. I probably would have fared better doing what I have done in the past, just painting it gold as a base and then hand painting in all of the pink parts. But none of this aluminum foil or tape is going to go to waste. It's going straight into my wrap pile to use for future sculpting projects. I constantly use foil and masking tape to bulk out armatures, so I am certain that this is going to get used up in the future.
This is taking forever. But I at least think I'm a little bit back on track.
This obviously was a really tedious process, and I was trying to be as detail-oriented and delicate with the paint job as possible, but I also had like 18 pieces of plate armor to detail paint, so I had to develop a little bit of a strategy deeper into this to make things go just a little bit faster. From here out, I decided to go in and roughly paint where I wanted all of my strawberries to go first before I did anything else, and then I went in with a light green acrylic marker on all of the pieces to rough in where I wanted all of the vines and leaves to go. I have so much more control with an acrylic paint marker versus a paintbrush, so I was able to get this stuff done way faster, and it also saves me having to mix paint and reload my brush constantly. To make the paint job a little bit more dimensional, I then went in with a dark green alcohol marker in a couple of places, a choice that will unfortunately backfire later in the project. Some of you probably could have told me that. I then finally returned to my brush with a medium green for the rest of the paint job to add more dimension and detail, blend things out a little bit more. Then for the final step of detail painting, I went in on all the strawberries, on all of the pieces, and added little seed details with a bright pinky yellow.
Hi, it has been 84 years. Once again, my time management skills. Skill is really putting that strongly. Painting this took me like 2 days, y'all. Oh. Mentally, physically, spiritually, it was 48 hours of my life. Anyways, I am so happy with how it's coming out. Of course, my self-critical maximalist brain is like, you know, it could be just a little bit more detailed, but then I also look at like this and the skirt and everything and I say, hold up, if it is any more detailed, your viewers' brains will implode. I have to say, once in a while, stop it. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully, if the weather doesn't come and corn dog me right in the keister, I'm hoping to film a reveal on a location. So I gotta get some fastenings on this so that I can put it on my body, and this is the situation. This is what we're doing.
The bracers got laced up with some weight elastics so that I can take them on and off without having to unlace them. The hip flare got the exact same treatment so that I can hopefully just slide it over my butt.
Get over my butt.
When I have to put it on instead of having to unlace it all the way every single time. Of course, it got laced up with some standard satin cord. The elbow pieces got elastic so that they articulate well with the bracers. The shin pieces also got elastic for ease of movement. I attached the two hip plates together with some rivets and buckles so that I can slide a cord underneath those and just tie those around my hips. And the gorget and pauldrons also got a complicated series of buckles and straps. Gorget got straps on the back to keep it closed, and the pauldrons were also attached to the gorget with those same straps. And I also attached some elastic to the bottom of the pauldrons to help them stay in place on my arms a little bit better. And look at this happy little bean. I'm so thrilled with how these are coming together.
Okay, with all of my fastenings and finishings applied, the final step is applying my clear glaze. The only problem with that is that this stuff does extremely poorly in high humidity, and it is literally 93% humidity tonight, and this next whole week is probably going to be at least 80% humidity every day. Again, I live in soup. I'm an ingredient in soup, and so is this. So I don't know exactly what to do here, but I think I'm gonna do a test piece and see just how bad the humidity is right now, and then, you know, we shall go from there.
2 seconds later.
Okay, I tested on a small piece because I figured that would be easy enough to fix, and it absolutely is very cloudy and too humid out here to do this. It's not good.
I decided to wait until the next morning and see what the humidity was like then and see if I could try spraying this again and make it work. And against all odds, despite somewhere in the neighborhood of 70% humidity, this actually went on okay. It just took several very thin coats so that it didn't get too cloudy. But since I was very concerned about this stuff ruining my paint job, I decided to break out the UV resin for the most important focal pieces. I was also kind of concerned about ruining my paint job with this, but I was very careful about application and curing, and I did it one step at a time. That way I could try and fend against drips and clumping and that sort of thing. And UV resin also weirdly goes on really well with just a paintbrush. I wouldn't have thought that. It sort of clumps together during the curing process, so it really doesn't leave any brush strokes either. It's pretty great.
Hello. I made it to reveal shoot day. I actually managed to get everything sealed. I'm so very surprised about that. It's still so humid today. It's still just soup. Hold on. Let's take a look at the temperature. I think it's like 92 right now, and the humidity is probably like 80%. Anyways, that is all to say, I'm very surprised that that triple thick enamel actually worked in all of this. And I do think the UV resin was a really good choice. What I think I'm gonna do is after all this, go back, coat everything in UV resin, really make it fancy. But that's a problem for another day. Today, I am hoping to film a little bit inside the greenhouse and also around the rose garden at the local botanical gardens, if it doesn't rain. It's probably gonna rain, but I'm gonna try my best, and I'm really, really excited. I have some ideas for shots that I wanna get, if I can. So let me quickly get in hair and makeup, and let's go on a little filming adventure. Hello there. The project is now finally complete, at least for this video, because I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this one, and particularly things that I want to change or improve upon.
I'm gonna do a quick little upgrade lightning round for changes and improvements I want to make to this costume. First of all, I want to put several coats of UV resin on everything to really seal and protect the paint job and also just give it more of that porcelain finish, which is actually something I've already done at this point. I just neglected to do it before filming the reveal, so you guys are gonna have to wait to see what this looks like on until the next video. Next, I feel like this silhouette ended up being pretty off because there was no real structure to the skirt going on. The skirt was a pretty rushed part of all of this because it was very much not the focus of this video. But in the future, I want to give it pink ruffles at the bottom, a couple of petticoats to give it more volume, and then I also want to give it some kind of foundational structure, like maybe even a crinoline underneath. I might repurpose the one that I used for my Halloween night costume to really give it that flared ball gown effect. And in a similar silhouette note, since the pauldrons don't completely cover my shoulders in this costume, there ends up being a lot of exposed skin, and it doesn't quite have the puff sleeve effect that I'm ultimately going for. So I think in the future I want to make a pink puff sleeve bolero to go underneath this so that it maintains the silhouette even whenever those move around a little bit. I also want some lighter colored clothes to wear underneath the entire costume so that the burgundy doesn't wash me out quite so much. I think I want to dye or switch out all of the elastic straps because they were just standing out way too much for my taste. I want to wear this with some taller platform boots in the future to make my stature a little bit more dramatic. I want to alter the hip flare plate so that I can move around a little bit easier and hopefully sit down.
That is the absolute most I can sit in this costume.
I think I want to glue some pearls or beads onto the armor to make it look a little bit more lavish. And finally, of course, I want to make a giant matching sword and possibly a shield. I haven't decided that far yet.
So of course, if you want to see a video on all of those alterations and improvements, including Big Sword, I'm going to try to make those as soon as possible, so you should subscribe. I'm really excited to have another stab at some of these things and improve it and make it closer to my overall vision. And of course, I'm very excited to have Big Sword. And also, if you enjoyed this video in general, it was a lot of work and effort and passion on my part. I had a really, really good time making this, but if you appreciate it, leave a comment, tell the video how pretty it is, leave a like so the algorithm doesn't yeet my channel into the abyss. And if you're really feeling a little saucy, you can support me over on my Patreon. My patrons are responsible for me being able to make anything like this because, oh no, is this costume so very expensive to me? Mr. Krabs would be rolling over and his chitinous grave. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, the biggest thank you for this video and every single one of my videos goes to my amazing patrons who once again are responsible for all of this happening. This is your fault in a good way, and especially my executive producers.
Mystic, Daniel Bergner, Caitlin, Scribble, Jazz the Bat, Mushroom Sita, Ghastly, Miss Ivy Mayhem, Galaxy Stardust 035, Luxabar, My Name is A, A, Miss Fenris, Becca, Nyloid Nam, Cyrus Orion, Jenny Craftsma, I Do TKD, Ren, Band Off the Yellow, Cloud Max, Philly Smelly, Stabby Horse, Heebie Jeebies, Cardia X, Christina Kimtia Art, Fiasco, Mossy Raven, Silver, Where You Send a Bad Rainbow, I'm not saying that name on the internet, APW Makes, Icecavan, A Wendu, Liana, Ermler Jean, Phoenix, PNG Not Found, Freedom and Gus Gus, Dodo, Zyle S, Agent Sketchy, Thea Maia, Lovisa, Eloquent Silence, Hypnos, Katie, Sweet Winter Garden, Gravity Drop, I Hang Out with Cats at Parties, and Bean the Bread.
Climbing a tree in these boots. Thank you.